Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Grants and Contracts podcast. I'm your co host, Lainey.
And this is Abraham, and it's great to see all of you joining us. If you are joining us live, welcome. If you're watching some replay, it's always great to see you here. And if you're live, please put in the comment area the name of your organization, whether you're for profit, nonprofit, and where you are joining us live. And your name will be awesome as well.
Yes, we love to see all of our visitors joining us from sometimes we have people from all over the world, which is so exciting. And if you're watching us on playback, still leave a comment. We love to interact, see who's watching it, and we love to see those comments as they come in after the fact. So, Abe, I know last week we did not do a podcast because it was 4th of July. It was a busy week for everyone. But you did something really exciting this weekend. What was it?
Oh, well, I love, there's a few great loves in my life, right? I love my family. I love the creator. I love government contracting. I love the grant world. But one of my newest love that I've discovered that I didn't know I would love it that much, but I played pickleball this weekend in what's called the Stars and Stripes Pickleball Tournament in Macon, Georgia. And Macon has the largest pickleball indoor facilities in the world at this time here. They have
Wow.
32 indoor courts. They took a bulk department store and turned it into pickleball courts. So pretty amazing. And I played down there, but I want to share some news with everybody who's hanging out with us. So when I do things, there are things I do to because somebody else loves it and I do it to support them. But the things that I do for myself, I do it because I want to be the best at what I do. So in my tournament this past weekend, my partner, who is Vision, she and I got first place. We got gold medal because she's 24 years old and I'm over 50. I won't say exactly how many years over 50, but I'm way over 50. Uh, I was running against all these young folks like this red team here. They're 19 years old. Vision, she's in her early 20s. And so I'm playing against all these young folks. And but we were fortunate enough we beat them and we got first place. But on top of that, I also play men's doubles, and my partner Greg, we finished first place. Also, we got gold. So surprised. I went down there just to have some fun, but we ended up getting two gold medals this past weekend. So it was a pickleball weekend.
So next stop, fully expecting gold Olympic medals when they put pickleball into the Olympics. I'm fully expecting Abe to be in the Olympics. We'll keep you updated on that. But so some exciting things that we're going to be talking about today. And this can apply if you have a nonprofit or an organization, because I think, missions are important no matter what the organization is. So we're excited to kind of dive into that today. A little bit later, we're going to be sharing actually a solution to some of the problems that Abe and me and a team of specialists were actually able to build out a solution to this. We'll share that a little bit later. Some of you, if you've been following along for a while, you've definitely seen the solution. You've seen us talk about it, but we're going to dive into that a little bit later. And then, as always, I kind of want to give a little hook for next week. So we're going to be talking about something that you've probably either you're really intrigued about or you're sick of hearing about, but the big beautiful bill. So next week you're going to want to join in and we'll talk a little bit later about that. So Abe, do you want to tell us what the mission is at GCA? So GCA, for example, is Government Contractors Association. That's where me and Abe both work at. And it is Abe. Abe is the founder of GCA. And we're a for-profit. It's actually we're a for-benefit company, but we're not a nonprofit organization is what I want to get at. But we still have a mission statement, and I feel like we do a great job of following that mission statement in our initiative. So I wanted you to share that mission statement to kind of explain a little bit about what mission bleeding can be.
Sure. The Our mission is EFA. So very simple, three words. EFA stands for to educate, facilitate, and advocate. And so at the very beginning, when we said let's build an organization to really help the grant community, the contracting community, we have to define what our mission is, and then we also have to define our vision as well. So our vision is creating access for you as an organization, nonprofit, for profit, to have greater access to the contracting world, the grants world. But our mission is very simple. Our mission statement is this here: to educate, facilitate, and advocate. And that's really it right there. Education is really, this podcast is part of educating. It's also part of our facilitating part of what we do and advocating for people. So everything centers back to those three words. And that's really what we're all about.
Yeah, and I love that mission statement because I think sometimes organizations they work really hard on their mission statement and they make it more difficult than it needs to be. You know, they want it to be very specific. They want it to say this, this, and this, where those three words really do. That's what we do. You know, we educate, facilitate, and advocate, and everything that we do can fall in one of those categories. Um, when you're talking about nonprofits, I know that, like I said, you know, the board wants to get very um, detailed in what they're talking about, but I think it's important to make sure we have a good understanding when we're looking at these mission and vision statements, which I'm talking about this because it leads into this whole idea of mission bleeding with grants. Is a mission statement is a current purpose. So what do you do? Why do you operate? Why do you do what you do? You know, that is what a mission statement. However, that vision statement could be the long-term aspirations. And I know that some organizations, their vision statement, like I've seen a vision statement that was eradicating hunger in the entire world. I personally, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it, Abe. Yes, I think it's a great vision statement, but that's not an achievable vision statement. I like to see vision statements that could be achievable in 5 to 10 years, and that's very hard to achieve, eradicating hunger in the entire world. You know, you might can eradicate hunger in your county. That's a great vision statement, but the entire world, I mean, no one's been able to do that yet. What do you think about that, Abe, when you're looking at a vision
Well,
statement?
yeah, I would say first we have to distinguish between vision statement and mission statement.
Mhm.
Your vision statement is the big and the unachievable statement. So your vision has to be big and really encompasses something that can never be achieved. And so that's your vision statement. But your mission statement is something that you should be able to achieve in a incremental phase. And so I think be defining, and that's where a lot of confusion happens, right? Sometimes people blur their vision statement and the mission statement. They should work together, but there's a confusion of what is a mission statement and what is a vision statement. And so the way I define a vision statement is a vision statement has to do with your eyes. Your eyes have to do with how you see the future. How do you see the future so far into the future? The big, perspective, and it's something that you should never be able to achieve. Because if you achieve your vision, then that means at that point the organization ends. And so your vision is so, and so as it relates back to your comment where you say to end world hunger, you can never end world hunger. So that's a perfect vision statement. But as it relates to that organization, they also need to have a mission statement. And your mission statement, if I have to define that, it is kind of like your purpose statement, and it's your goals. What are the things that you will be doing? So your mission has to do with your hands and your feet, whereas the vision has to do with your eyes of how you see the future. Your hands and your feet are what you're doing now, your day to day, your week to week, month to month, your 3 year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 50-year game plan. And these are milestones that should be achievable. So your missions are broken into more uh, short term, midterm, and long term, and they should be achievable, whereas your vision should never be achievable. And so that's how I would define it for myself and for what we do here at GCA, because GCA is, educate. We do that every day. We have different forms of education. We have, classes. We have Tuesday night CCM classes. We have a lab sessions on Wednesday. We have a guest panelist that comes to, that comes to share. We bring in industry partners, but those are the educational part of it. We bring in agencies as part of the advocacy, because the agencies come and they say, hey, this is how you can work with us. So, and then the facilitation is where we connect people with each other. We connect them to resources. If somebody says, I need a lender, we connect them to a lender. If someone says, I need a teaming partner that has specialty or capabilities in this niche area. So that's part of facilitating. Matchmaking is part of facilitating. So we do the mission, which is achievable on a ongoing basis, short, mid, and long-term purposes. And the vision statement is so big, creating access. That's our vision statement. We will never ever finish creating access, because there will always be need and gaps in terms of nonprofits accessing grant opportunities or for-profit accessing contract opportunities. There will always be a need for that there. So that's how I would define that there.
Thank you, Abe. Yeah, and I love first your passion behind it, but when you explain stuff, I feel like you break it down really well, explaining versus the eyes versus the hands and the feet. And so, why did I just ask Abe to explain about the mission and the vision when we're talking about diving into grants, all about grants? I've never seen a grant not ask for your mission and vision. So that is something that's why it's so important to make sure it's really encompassing what you do. Um, the board agrees on it, everybody kind of agrees on it, and it's something that has to be worked on. Especially sometimes I think organizations, maybe they start out as one thing, and we're going to get into this about mission bleeding, but maybe as they grow or as they expand 10, 20 years later, they can definitely take on some different aspects versus what they started at. So
And
diving
then
in today.
sometimes, yeah, and sometimes you have to revisit, right, your vision
Mhm.
and your mission, and you may need to change it over time. For example, if you are a organization that supports certain type, like for example, there is a nonprofit called Black Girls Code, right? That's a coding. It's a nonprofit that focuses on helping young Black ladies learn to code. It's a
Mhm.
very specific organization with a very specific niche market. It's young ladies. It's one. It's coding. Well, if that is the mission, AI is changing how you code, because AI is coding now. And so for that organization, you have to revisit your goals, because if AI is coding, then how do you change your support? How do you change your mission on your day to day? Now the vision can still be ongoing, because maybe being a prompt engineer instead of just a coder might be part of how the organization needs to adjust. But sometimes some nonprofits are very laser, very niche focused, and so in those type of situations, you have to revisit your mission and your vision every now and then. But some organization, if it's to feed the homeless, you don't have to revisit that. It's the things you have to revisit is how you do it, but not necessarily the big picture stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so today's topic is the dangers of applying for every opportunity without having a funding strategy. So I think a lot of organizations, especially in what we're seeing in this funding landscape. We saw a lot of cuts coming on the federal side. You know, foundations are getting harder. It's a hard funding landscape out there. And I think organizations, they think that you need to apply for every grant you find, but here's the truth. Chasing every grant might be killing your mission. And I feel like people aren't talking about it a lot. Um, I know when I first started looking at grants, when I first got in the grant world, I wanted any way to figure out how I could apply for this grant. You know, if I saw a grant, it was like um having a circle and trying to put it to the square. How can I get that through there? And what ways can I match it up? And in some ways, I think that there is the creative aspect of proposal writing, grant writing, where you know that there's some synergy there with the organization. You just have to find that synergy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you know, creating new programs. I've seen that before where we have an organization, they want this grant money, so they create an entire new program to get it. If that fits your mission, great, but you can't create a new program every time you want a new grant. That's, you know, you're getting away from what you truly do. You're getting away from your bread and butter, and then you end up mission bleeding where you're doing everything instead of focusing on your one, two, or three things.
Yeah, can you define a little bit more what mission bleeding or mission creep or mission drift? Can you define that a little bit more? 'Cause it's kind of self-explanatory, but let's dive deeper into that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that there.
Yes, so mission bleeding is this idea of it you turn your mission into a catch-all. So maybe your mission, like we just talked about, is to feed the homeless. Well, now you've started feeding um not homeless people. Maybe you go into schools and feed school children, which that's a great mission, but that's not what the original thing was to do. And then you start feeding the elderly in homes, and then you start doing a drug. Sorry, I'd accidentally muted me, but you start doing a drive-through, and next thing you know, you're no longer just feeding the homeless, you're feeding everyone in the community. It doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to do, but you're going away from what you originally set out to do. And I think there's in every organization, you know, there's growth. So maybe that is the next step in your growth. But when we're talking about mission bleeding, we're talking about you're so hard chasing that funding, chasing that program that you're getting away from what you originally planned to do. And that's why funding strategies are so important, and funding strategies that not just the executive director is working on, but that the board sees, any staff member sees. And it's something you can go back and look at over and over again to make sure you really are hitting that target goal of what your mission is and who you want to serve, and you're not just catching everybody.
Yeah, like we personally experienced that at GCA, right? As you mentioned earlier, the Government Contractors Association, we support for-profit, nonprofit organizations, and we are an ideal organization to get funding from the government, from the SBA, because a lot of these training here, there's a lot of different funding opportunities out there. And so we have actually looked at probably 10, 15 different grants to do exactly what our missions are. And we've applied for one grant, which we did not win. And I'll go into why we didn't win. What we realize is this here. If we do exactly what the grantor, whether it's the SBA or the government or a foundation or anything else, based upon their requirements, it would have moved us so far, maybe not at the beginning, but 50% away from what we currently do. And
Okay.
so most grants, we did not pursue it, but there was one grant, I think it was, the grant was, I think the title of the grant was Enterprising Women of Color, meaning that they wanted someone to train different underserved communities, women entrepreneurs who were of color. And we said, you know what, I would say about 80% of our members are women, and more than half of them are women of color. So why don't we apply for this grant? But then they were asking us to do social media marketing. They were asking us to do many other things related to just the training and the equipping women to become entrepreneurs. We applied for it. We put in some teaming partners to cover that area. But we wrote the program exactly how we thought the program would be successful, not how they think the program would be successful, but we wrote our response to how we feel that the program would be successful. And we didn't win because we didn't position it to the way they wanted to be positioned. But if we position it exactly how they wanted, then it would have moved us away from our
Yeah.
EFA to becoming more of a social media consulting company, marketing consulting company, versus equipping people to become better, receiving grants and contracts from the government. So sometimes it's better to, if you do apply for a grant or a contract, you might want to write it the way you feel is appropriate, even though your chance of winning becomes less. Because the secret to winning a contract or a grant is to write it how they want you to write it. But then
Mhm.
that's going to move you from your mission. And so it's both.
Was this a state opportunity or federal opportunity?
This was a federal from the Minority Business Development Agency.
Okay, so yeah, that's I see this so much in federal opportunities and sometimes in state. It's this idea we talk about, the government thinks that they have a solution to the problem, but when it on paper it looks good, but maybe in action it's not what would really happen. And so that's where I see a lot of this, that you're trying to get that federal money. So like exactly what you're saying, you might twist a few things that don't really work the best for your organization, but you really need that federal money. Where on the foundation side, and I think that that's why we're seeing this shift, is foundations are more open to solving a problem the way the organization would solve the problem versus having an already solved problem. With that being said, though, there are opportunities, and we've talked about this. I don't know if we have a full podcast on this, but if we don't, we should, of the idea of going to the government saying, hey, you have a problem. I have the solution. Let's work something out to where you don't have to wait for a contract to come out. You don't have to wait for a grant to come out, but instead you're able to kind of present them the solution to the problem.
Yeah, and that's the one positive thing under the, amongst other situations, but under the Trump administration, they are going directly more to organizations to seek solutions versus going through a procurement process that can take 6 months, 12 months, and then and then positioning that they want this solution, whereas that may not be the solution. So the government is shifting their approach to some degree, saying that instead of starting with a problem and then coming up with what they think the solution needs to be, they're going to the marketplace. They're going to different organizations, say, "Hey, this is the problem. Tell us what are some solutions out there." And so they're using CSOs, commercial solutions openings. They're using unsolicited proposals. They're using different approach like OTAs and some other new methodologies of how they're acquiring solutions to fix the problems that they have, which is interesting. Which I think as a whole is going to be positive for all of you out there who are learning to navigate as the world changes with AI and with different administrations, how they're acquiring solutions to fix the pain points that they have. And some of the pain points could be non-profit related, or it could be for-profit related.
Yeah, and I actually just did a grant. I've seen two grants that are kind of like this. They're state, so I'm in Georgia, so they were Georgia grants. One was for the opioid crisis, and so they know that they have a problem. There is an opioid crisis going on in the nation, and specifically, this is specifically for Georgia. And they asked you to, kind of how would you solve this problem? Not It wasn't an open-ended question. There were some guidelines of different ideas, because some people it was rehabs. Some people it's counseling. Some people it's more of the drug treatment programs, like where they take medication to treat the problem. With that being said, though, it was more of an open-ended grant. They're not saying do this, this, and this. They're letting the organization solve the problem. So that was a kind of a just a different way to see a state-funded opportunity. And then I just looked at another opportunity that's due a little bit later, and it's the same thing for children. Kind of like this workforce development slash just helping this next generation of students coming up and children, and that they know that there's an issue, and some of those issues maybe include homelessness, foster care. There's some different trials that children are going through, and how do we help them get through that to where they become um community members. They thrive out of those situations, and so you're able to kind of present your problem. What do you do? Is it mentoring? Is it you're going in and teaching classes? Are you doing extracurricular activities? And that was more of their solution to that problem. So I hope in the future that we see more of those style grants where you're able to say, hey, this is what our organization does, this is how we solve the problem, this is what the program looks like, and then you get the funding from that, versus the other way that we've seen, which is that cookie cutter of, if you can't do this, this, and this, we're not giving you the money.
Hmm.
So and we've seen that too, of if you can't do step A, B, and C, we're not just paying you to do step A and B and somebody else can do C. You have to do all three. And we talk about partnering and that kind of stuff, but there's some missing pieces. And so I think that I hope we see this shift over the next
Hmm.
4 years and even beyond that, because um there's also a shift we're seeing, and we've seen this in some of the state grants and even some foundation, where they understand how hard grant applications are. Because anybody that's out there, and if you're watching, put a comment. If you've applied for federal grants, it is like, I mean, it's on the contracting side as well. You get a 100-page RFP you have to read through, and then their application is so many pages, and you've got to answer all this stuff, and you've got to go through all this, and a lot of time it's a little overkill for what you might be doing. And we're seeing, or I've seen this, is a lot of these federal and state, they're moving towards more of the foundation application types, where it's a few questions and then maybe there's a follow-up, kind of that's the first round of applications, but it's not so heavy on the applications. They're kind of just, they're not having to work as hard. I don't want to say they're not working as hard, but they're not having to go through a 100-page application and then it takes, 6 months to a year to even review anything. They're able to kind of get that funding out faster. But I want to describe this. If this sounds like put a comment here, put a chat, kind of raise your hand. I know we're not live, but give us some emojis. So you get an alert, say you get an email from one of these grant websites. Maybe you're signed up through a email that they're sending email blasts on grants that are coming out. So you get an alert. You realize the due date's in a couple of days. You didn't know about this grant. You're scrambling to apply. You start looking at it and you're like, we're almost a perfect fit. We're a 90% fit. So we're going to tweak our mission to fit. We're going to hope for the funding that it's going to come. And then we're going to do this all over again next week when we get that next application. Does that sound like anybody? Because I can say when I first started grant writing or kind of looking at funding, even on the contracting side, I mean, really it was, I would get an email, I'd be like, oh my goodness, we got to do this. We got to do this. Where in reality, what I do now is a lot different because one, I'm not as stressed out. I'm not rushing and I'm not losing that clarity. Now with me doing the research that I do, I try to do weekly research. And what I'm doing with that research is I'm finding opportunities that are out there. And sometimes, yes, they do have, strict deadlines where I might be a little rushed, but I'm really trying to scour through opportunities more frequently and putting those on my bid board, saving those. So if I find an opportunity, for example, if I'm working for a client and I find an opportunity that opens in January, instead of just skipping over that if it is the perfect opportunity, I'm putting that on my bid board so that when January comes or maybe November comes, I can say, oh, this is coming up in January. Let's get our application in for that. Kind of being able to have that schedule out. Abe, has that ever been you in the government contracting world?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges managing your pipeline and searching for the right grants that's going to be a match, and then adjusting as you need to adjust. I think that problem has persisted, for different organizations that we have supported. And so, yeah, I think that does happen. I do also want to share this different angle, right? Where when should you shift your mission? When should you allow what we call mission creep, right? When should you do that? To where if your mission is going in one path, but all of the grants are in a sister niche area or sister support area that's not exactly in your sweet spot, should at some point in your organizational the life of your organization, should there be a point in your life where you say, you know what, we need to reevaluate, and for us to sustain and to grow as a nonprofit, we need to change our mission? Is there a time for that? And if you're watching us, let us know, should there be a time? Or maybe you've been a part of a nonprofit where you did make a shift so that you can be sustainable, you can grow. Where, what are some ideas or some thoughts of when someone should do that there? Yeah. Have you experienced that, Lainey, with some of the organization you work with?
I haven't experienced it firsthand. I mean, I've experienced the idea of we going in for those yearly planning meetings, taking a look at our mission, making sure it's still what we're doing, taking a look at the vision, that kind of stuff. But I think a big idea would be exactly what you were talking about with the coding of, if you're an organization that, I think about this, if you were an organization that was, I mean, I think coding's a great example. I don't even have to go back further than that. If it was pre-internet times, or you were an organization that's doing something and you're not changing with the times, you're going to become extinct, because your goal can't be to teach kids how to type right if we have a computer coming out. And there was
Mhm.
probably organizations that's truly what they were doing. The same thing with I mean, I think it can be with anything, because it's constantly changing. The court systems are constantly changing. The aid is constantly changing. So a lot of these organizations, they work through the court system. So if there's a new law that comes out, they have to kind of shift what they're doing to make sure it's correct with the court system. So I think that everybody's going to have change, and especially if you want to be sustainable I mean, I have an organization that I work with. They've been around, I think, 45 years. So yes, they've changed throughout that time, because a lot of stuff has changed throughout that. They've had to, yes, their problem that they solve it's still a problem. I mean, their problem that they're doing is therapy for children that have been victims of sexual assault. So yes, that has been something for 40 years, unfortunately, has been an issue, but they've had to evolve as it's went on for different reasons, and they've had to add more programs, where this idea of
Mhm.
mission bleeding, a huge program that they've actually had to add is it's court ordered therapy for children that are exhibiting problem behavior, is pretty much what it is. But I mean, they didn't start out doing that. They had to add that when that became something in the court, and they realized, yes, this is how we solve part of this issue at hand in the community of eliminating that. I'm pretty sure their vision is that they want to see a world where sexual assault does not exist. So that had to do with that vision, was when that court order came out, they needed to add that new program. They needed to add staff for that program. Another idea, and I know I'm using them as the same idea, but in the community that they work in, when they first started, the community was mainly English speaking, but as those 45 years, they have a really strong Spanish speaking presence. And so they added that. They added those services. They added therapists that were Spanish speaking because that was a huge thing. And that's not mission bleeding. That's kind of adapting with who you are, who your people are, changing that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I was part of a new nonprofit, and in the state of Georgia in the I think 2008, 2009, the state of Georgia passed what's called the English only driver's license bill, meaning that every single person who's going to get a driver's license or renew their driver's license, they have to do the exam and pass the written part of it in English only. Well, practically that makes sense, right? This is America. Everybody should be able to read and write English, and we should be able to go and take the written exam of the driver's license part of it in English. Makes total sense from that perspective. The undertone to that was to create where the driver's license become a tool, because voting, you need your driver's license, many other things comes back to your driver's license. And so to prevent undocumented workers and undocumented individuals from obtaining their driver's license bill. So that's the some of the goals behind it, whether it's stated or not stated. The unintended consequences to that was there was a lot of documented individuals who immigrated to the United States through legal means, and where English is a second language and they don't speak the language. They didn't have the opportunity to get to be educated. And so I went to meet with the governor and their team, and I said, my parents came here through documented means. We didn't speak any English when we got here. If my parents had to take the driver's test in English only, they would have failed. That means they would not have been able to get any viable jobs. They would not be able to drive. They would have to use mass transport, the mass transportation system. Uh, we would not have had the opportunity we had if that was the case. And we presented to
Yeah.
them that it makes sense in some situation, but there's some unintended consequences to this bill. And I share that as an example. But the nonprofit, out of that, a nonprofit was created out of the immigrant community that said that this bill makes sense, but it hurts the immigrant community, those who are here properly with documentation. And so we form a nonprofit to fight the English only driver license bill. But from that, the mission at the very beginning was to fight this English only driver's license bill. But then as that evolved, we said, you know what, there's other issues out there.
Yeah.
And then the nonprofit, shifted as from a one single issue item as a nonprofit to other things. And then as we grew, we there was a foundation that wanted to fund some of the things that we were doing, and so we were able to change our complete vision and our mission to become more of a national organization, to where we did a name change from the AALAC, Asian American Legal Advocacy Center, to now Asian American Advancing Justice, which is similar to the NAACP or the Jewish version of that, which is the Anti-Defamation League. And so there's different, you may start as one, but you might shift to a different mission as you evolve. Why? Because it meets a different purpose, or it meets a bigger need. And so you may have to change for a different purpose. But that's not the problem where most people have. Most people, you have a good mission, you just change it from week to week, month to month, based upon the grants that's out there, and that would be problematic and detrimental to the organization itself.
Yeah, and I've heard that story multiple times, but I do love that example and I love that story. And I feel like that could be a whole podcasts, getting into the details of that stories and some wins that y'all had. Something that I was thinking about when you were talking about that I'd never thought about before is, you were able to fight the bill, so that's great. But, how is this not the same thing as if somebody was unable to see? Somebody might read the test to them. That's allowed. So why would you not be able to read it in your first language? But what I did want to pull up is kind of another example is CASA, which is court appointed special advocates. So it actually started, I'll tell you what they are first. So children that are maybe in the foster system or going through court cases of that aspect get appointed a special advocate. These advocates are normally volunteers, so from the community, and they sit with them at court. They also have their files to make sure, like, they're kind of guardians over their files and information, so that you can imagine, if we sent a 7-year-old into court and said, "Hey, do you have your binder?" It would easily get lost. So that's what these court appointed specials, but also to sit with them at court, if they're not in the courtroom the whole time, making sure that they just have somebody to help them, make sure they're eating lunch, doing that kind of stuff, but also getting more information about their case. And how this started, CASA started, it started in Washington. So there was a judge in Washington in the 70s, actually, I didn't realize it was that long ago, that he decided he didn't want to make decisions on a child's case that he didn't know all the information about. So he knew what the child was saying. He might have known what the parent was saying, but he didn't have somebody that could kind of investigate the situation. So he kind of started this program. Well, the program grew. And so I don't think it was a nonprofit at first at all. I think it literally just like this judge's courtroom kind of started this program. Now it is a nonprofit. It is nationwide. Ronald Reagan made it nationwide during his term. And I would say that they've had definitely some changes in missions, because it started in Washington. Nevada was the second state. And then they kept growing. More court systems were like, oh, we really need this. We really need this. And now it is nationwide. However, they all share the same mission of supporting children with these court appointed special advocates. I would say they probably share a lot of the same training, that kind of stuff. And now a lot of counties have their own CASA, or like regions have their own CASA. But the same idea of growth will change some things that are going on.
Yeah, and sometimes the lack of growth forces you to change. But again, coming back to mission creep, a lot of organization, as they go from foundation to foundation, or to agencies and to different donors out there, they keep on trying to change their mission to adapt to the grant itself, and that's really what's hurting a lot of organizations. More so than strategically adapting to different needs or different market conditions, or some of the changing times as things have evolved over the life of that organization. So I think the more prevalent problem is people not having a very strong mission, and because they don't know it, then they keep on evolving, or they keep on shifting based upon different conditions. And if you do that, then you can't really build a true foundation. To your board will get confused. You can't build a true volunteer base. You'll be all over the place, and then people are like, what do you do again? And that's not clear. But it really starts with your core team, right? Your core team is usually the founder of the nonprofit. First, you have to, the founders have to be clear on their mission, and then the staff have to be clear on the mission, and then the board has to be clear on the mission, and then your volunteers, and then your audience have to be clear on the mission. If it's not clear, then I would say it's problematic. And then here's my challenge to all of you who are watching this here. As of right now, and I'm going to give you a specific question. Do you know your mission statement?
Yeah.
Do you know your mission statement? And if you don't know your mission statement, guess what? Who else will know your mission statement? You are part of the organization and you don't even remember your mission statement. How will your donors know? How will the foundation know? How will your grant writer know your mission if you, who's intimately involved in the organization on a day-to-day basis, you don't even know your mission statement? If you can't state it, then there's a problem. And
Mhm.
that's why I said GCA's mission statement is very simple. It's 3 words. Educate, facilitate, and advocate. 3 words. It's really our tagline. It's also our mission statement. And so you have to have a mission statement that is so clear that everybody remembers it. And then if your team remembers it, the core people remember it, then other people will get to know it as well. But if you, as the executive director, if you watch this episode, or if you as a staff member or a grant writer within your organization and you don't even know the mission statement, you have to read it and look it up every time. There's some problem bigger than just funding of looking for funds itself.
Yeah, and I think too, sometimes you'll see this when you walk into organizations, but I think it's a great thing to have. They'll have their mission statement on the front door. They have it in offices, that kind of stuff. But I think that's important because you're constantly reading it. You're constantly having that in your mind of this is what we do. This is why we do what we do. Let's keep doing that. And I think that's really important of doing the mission statement. I think I've explained this that I had visited a church and they have their mission statement, which is it's actually a church that I used to attend. So it's reaching and raising the next generation to live out God's truth. I know that because every Sunday to this day, if I go visit that church, they say their mission statement. So then everybody knows it, like we're constantly, that's how it's ingrained in my mind because I can just hear it over and over. Somebody's saying it. It's on a t-shirt, it's on this. But I think that's good for organizations. And I agree with you. If you don't even know your mission statement, why would a donor want to give? Or why is a grant going to want to be given if you can't properly explain your mission or explain how your program fits that mission?
So it really starts back saying, maybe we need to do a thorough podcast, a training session on how to create a vision statement, how to create a mission statement for your nonprofits out there, and for profit as well, because for profit runs into the same issue as well.
Yeah.
But maybe that would be a great topic. Let us know if you guys want to learn more about how to create the ideal vision statement and the ideal mission statement for your nonprofit. If there's enough requests or enough comments down there, we will do that session there to really help you define. And we'll be more than happy to review your vision statement and your mission statement to make sure that it's clear, it's simple, it's unique, it's special. I love doing that, because I've worked with so many different organizations and helping them to rebrand and restructure the organization so that their messaging is on point. Their vision statement is on point, their mission statement is on point, so that they can continue to grow. In the absence of that, you're like you're wandering left and right, and you don't really achieve the ultimate goal of making an impact.
I agree. And I think that would be a really fun class as well, just because I agree with Abe. I like hearing people's mission statements and, kind of getting to brainstorm on what that looks like. So definitely leave a comment and we'll look at that. We have a few more minutes left on the podcast and I want to share. Abe, do you want to share your screen or you want me to share our tool that's really good for helping with bid boards and grants and kind of helps prevent some of this mission bleeding?
Yeah, I can share my screen and give everybody a quick example on here. So let me pull up my screen here, and we do have some awesome bonuses to share with everybody as we wrap up here. So this is GovGenie. GovGenie is a tool designed to help for-profit and nonprofits. For-profits go after contracts and nonprofits go after grants. And sometimes it's both, right? Because there's grants for nonprofit and for-profit, and there's contracts for nonprofit as well. So this is the dashboard. It kind of tells you what your pipeline looks like. But to kind of get started, you come in here, you hit grants. And so these are the different grants in here. That's 13,800 grants that's currently in there. You can come in here, you can put in here, like if you work with the homeless, you can just put a keyword in here. There's this grant here, continuum of care competition and renewal replacement of youth homeless demonstration program grants. And so just come in here, see what's out there. But if you're interested in this one, so you can say, okay, let me save this grant here, and it will save it so that you can review it back later. Now, what we are currently building for grants right now is a grant board similar to the contract board. So I'm going to show you from the contract perspective, because contract has this, and we're building a board for contract just like this here for grants as well. So I can come in here and I can put in here a keyword, janitorial. And so there will be different projects and that will pop up. There's a whole bunch of, there's probably about 500,000 current opportunities in the system. So right now there's 5,251 opportunities that have the word grants in here. And then I can kind of let me see this one here. This one is in Austin, Texas. If I'm interested in this here, instead of tracking it, I can add it to my bid board. And I'm showing you the bid board, but the grant board it should be launching very soon. So you'll be able to add a grant to the grant board. I'm just showing you from the contract board perspective. So I just added this janitorial, assuming this is a homeless grant opportunity. So it will come to the bid board. And it will be very similar to this here. You can see that the janitorial project I just added is here. And so the grant board will be in the same fashion here. So I can start tracking this, this project here, and I can scope it out, and I can start to, it would give me a decision matrix, and I can actually start to draft the proposal or the grant response. And so if I click on this here, I can come inside of the card. I can come to the attachments. All the attachments are already pulled in here into the system. I can come in the proposal. If I want to start the proposal, I can come and say, hey, let me add my technical proposal. And I can put my technical proposal and upload the link. Or usually what we recommend is use a link. Using a link will allow you to, for everybody to work on it simultaneously. So I can come in here and add it. And then I can go to the discussion, and I can say at, whoever, let's start to write this proposal. And I can save it, and it would message whoever I mentioned here. It will send them an email. So everything is communicating here. And so when they see the email, they will click on the link. It will bring them back in here, and then they can come and click on this here to start to write the technical proposal itself. So everything is kind of managed all in one place. So this gives you a quick perspective, a quick overview of how GovGenie works. And so if you are interested in using the GovGenie tool to help you manage your grants or your contracts, this tool is available. And all you need to do is just go to govgenie.com. And you can just get started. Now, as part of our audience here, we are giving a very special. And so if you are interested in this here, you can get this here I'm going to put it into the chat. You can use this code here and get 50% off of GovGenie. GovGenie is $99 a month. You can get started at no cost. But this coupon code will allow you to get the silver for 90 instead of $99 a month. You can get it for $49 a month, but you have to use it immediately, or the code may expire. And so I'm gonna put this in the chat. And if you're interested in getting set up, you get a 50% off. Or if you decide to do it for the year, it will be 50% off for the year as well. And so if you just if you go in there, you get the special. So instead of, the monthly, if you buy for the year, it would be about $800 for the year. You get it about nine something for the year, and you would actually get it for about $470 for the year. So 50% off for all of you who are watching this episode here. So with that, Lainey, any final closing comments before we wrap up? You want to talk about what we're doing next week?
Yeah, so I first want to answer a question. So Alana from LinkedIn said, Lainey, how do you utilize USA Spending? So I like to utilize USA Spending. We sometimes call it our favorite website. But you're able to go in and see, past performance. You're able to go in and see what grants have been given out, who they were given out to on the contracting side, who is the person that currently holds the grant, who's gotten it in the past. The budget for that, you can kind of track it if it's went up and down. So that's how I like to utilize USA Spending. We look at that a lot when we're doing research on stuff. On the grant side, I use a lot of 990s when I'm looking at foundations, but on USA Spending for those federal and state grants. And yes, I want to put in the chat is that next week we have a podcast we will be doing. We're calling it The Big Beautiful Bill: Cuts, Chaos, and Contract Gold. So we are going to be overviewing what y'all have all heard about, which is the Big Beautiful Bill, but what does it mean for you as a government contractor? So we're going to be looking in some of the details and some of the overlooked things, and we think that it's going to have some really positive effects for government contracting. I'm going to put that link in the chat, so make sure to go ahead and register. You'll get a notification when we're starting next week. And Abe, do you have anything to add for that Big Beautiful Bill?
Yes. Well, many of you guys have seen a lot of grants cut and a lot of contracts being cut, federal employees being laid off, some of your employees that's working on government projects, and some of the grants that you receive have been cut for the last 6 months. We're going to address that a little bit, and then we're going to talk about how that set the stage for all of these additional spending, because you can't have cuts. You can't have new spending if you don't make some cuts. And so we're going to talk about how this new budget, this new bill that was signed last week, how that's going to impact the contracting community and the grants community, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit. Come and hang out with us next week so that you can learn more about how to take advantage of the changes that's happening with the new budgets and some of the new programs that's going to be kicking in.
That is great. Well, I can't wait to see you again next week, Abe. Maybe you'll have some more gold medals for us. But until then, remember that you are only one grant away
and one contract away from your goals, from your next employee, from the new home that you want, from the new car that you want. One grant, one contract away. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you next week.
See y'all next week. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everyone.